Hey y'all, let's talk about cuttings. These are all wild, native to this area. The elderberry bush, or the elder bush, is a very resilient plant. It's perennial. It comes back every year. A lot of farmers will take and cut it back to the ground, and the new growth comes up with berries after a couple of years of growth. But if you do a little search online and look at some different areas, the cuttings can get quite expensive. Now, there are some very desirable, more productive varieties that will be getting into our patch eventually next year. The more cultivars you have, the more prolific the blooms and the whole plants help with each other. But we've got an acre tilled up out there, 15-foot rows apart, and then 5-foot wide rows. I think we'll have about 10 of them. So looking at about 600 plants. That's a lot of money if you go to buy all those cuttings. So I kind of do things the old-fashioned way, and they may not produce quite as good as an invented or propagated cultivar, but these will do just fine, as they have been for years. I had about 200 that I started early in water, and I've used some willow tree. I have learned some tricks on that. I, of course, boiled the bark to make a tea, and then let it cool, and just kind of did about a 1 part to 3 in the water that these cuttings were sitting in. But then I got smart for my britches and let the tea ferment, and I didn't know it had fermented, and used it straight, and it kind of rotted the few cuttings that I had. As well, I just went out and started putting cuttings in, and that will work, but you're going to have limited success. All the little nodes on these branches, you see all them little dots, they will create roots, but it's best if you'll cut it. I got these are not really, these are all new growth for this year. They were putting on pods, but as you can see, I've got 2 nodes, one at the top and one at the bottom, and that allows you to have roots come out at this node, and then your leaves and new growth come out the top. I do a 45-degree angle on the bottom just to keep them straight, because it gets to be a mess when you've got a load of elderberry cuttings to process and chop down to size. But what I do, and there's different schools of thought, you can do it how you'd like, but I've had some success now that I've kind of figured out is right. 200 cuttings later, but after I do my cuttings, I'll soak them in water, and now we know, usually about 3 days, and change the water once. I was having some problems having the full sun, and this old hot Texas sun had that water almost boiling, and again it damaged the cuttings. So it's best to keep them in natural light, but if you can keep them cool or in the shade, that seems to work well for me. But after about 3 days of soaking in this water, then I will transfer them over to a potting mix of a little chicken manure, not much, and I'll probably about 10%, and then just some potting mix and some natural worm castings here off the place, and some biochar that's been inoculated. I'll create a playlist, or you can find it on Washboard Chronicles, but that biochar is a game changer. It's a way to really store the nutrients in the soil, and I haven't heard a lot of talk about it among the elderberry community. But I think it's going to be a game changer as far as soil amendment to really lock in that nutrients that the elderberries like. So we'll talk more about that later. But I've got a whole batch of fresh cuttings that I cut today, and I'm going to trim them down and get them ready to get in their little water bath for a few days, so they are ready to get some dirt and grow some feet, and then they'll be getting in the ground definitely by spring. All right, we're hard at it on harvesting cuttings from some of the better bushes that we found, and as we've showed in other videos and other places, it's best really to use some that now started off with even trying to harvest little bitty ones like this, and they'll do okay, but it's really more hardy if you get one about the size of a pencil, if not a little larger. You can get into some of these bigger ones and they'll be okay. I'm just not real excited about whether or not they're going to work. But you need 2 nodes on these cuttings. I like to get it off some of the newer growth. Some folks suggest that you want a little green tint to it. This late in the year, being August, not going to have a whole lot of green growth on the plant. So I'm having good success with the ones I'm doing. So I'll show you how to do that. So we've got a node here, which would produce leaves, and here. So I like to cut it at a 45-degree angle. That kind of helps me mark which the bottom is. As you can see, I've got a pile here that can get mixed up really quickly. And then just straight up the top of the other node. So I've got a node here, which will go down in my dirt, and then the top node which is where the new growth will come out. And again, as stated in previous videos, we're going to soak it in water for about 3 days before we go to the dirt with it like this. But it's as simple as that. When you're harvesting them, you just grab it, find that first node, 45-degree angle, helps you keep up which end is the bottom. Cut the 2 stems off, and then a straight cut at the top, and you're ready to stick it in the water bath. That's just normal rainwater. I don't use chlorinated water because of the chemicals, obviously, and we've got an abundance of rainwater storage that we use to get these soaking for a few days before we put them in the dirt. Easy as that. They're expensive to buy, but you can find them pretty much everywhere if you know what you're looking for.